AITA for refusing to forgive my brother after he told our family I was secretly adopting my own child. This whole situation has been absolutely draining, and I could really use some outside perspective because right now I feel completely betrayed. For some backstory, I 36F have been with my husband 37M for 10 years. We've always known we wanted kids, but it was a long, painful road to get there. We struggled with infertility for years, went through several rounds of IVs, and had heartbreaking losses along the way. It was the hardest thing we've ever faced together, but earlier this year, we were blessed to adopt a beautiful baby girl. Our daughter's adoption is a private matter, something that my husband and I decided was only for us and a few trusted family members to know. We wanted to raise her as our child without the added labels or explanations that sometimes come with adoption. And since we went through so much to have her in our lives, we didn't want the details of her arrival to overshadow the fact that she's our daughter, plain and simple. The only person outside our immediate family who knew was my brother, Ryan 34M. He's always been someone I trusted, and he was one of the first people I confided in when we began the adoption process. I told him in confidence, hoping he'd respect my boundaries, and he assured me he would. I really thought he understood how personal and sensitive this was for me. But a few weeks ago, during a family gathering, my brother blindsided me. We were all sitting around after dinner when he suddenly said, "So, are you ever going to tell everyone that you adopted her?" My heart stopped. I looked at him, absolutely horrified, as everyone's heads turned toward me. I just sat there, feeling like I'd been stripped bare in front of my entire family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I was too shocked to say anything at first. Then he kept going, saying something along the lines of, "It's not like there's anything to be ashamed of." My relatives, who had no idea, looked completely taken aback, and I just wanted to melt into the floor. It was like all the plans we had for our daughter's life, how we wanted to share her story on our own terms, had been ripped out of our hands. After that, I excused myself and my husband, and we left the party. I didn't say a word to Ryan as we walked out, but I felt humiliated and betrayed. The next day, I called him and asked him what in the world he was thinking. His response: "You're making this way too big of a deal. I just don't understand why you're so secretive about it. Our family deserved to know." I tried to explain that it wasn't about shame or secrecy, but about protecting our daughter's privacy and allowing us to be the ones to decide when and how to share her story. He brushed me off, saying I was being ridiculous and too sensitive. According to him, I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Since then, Ryan has been texting and calling, trying to make amends, but I'm not ready to forgive him. He still doesn't see what he did wrong, and every time I think about it, I get so angry all over again. He shattered my trust in him, and it feels like he's more focused on defending his actions than actually apologizing for what he did. My husband agrees that we shouldn't feel pressured to forgive him just because he's family, but my parents think I should let it go for the sake of family unity. My mom has called me a few times, saying that Ryan meant well and that I'm hurting him by refusing to move on. She even implied that I was damaging the family over a misunderstanding. But to me, it doesn't feel like a misunderstanding. He knew how much this meant to us, and he took it upon himself to decide when and how we shared that information. I feel like I can't trust him anymore, and that's something I don't know how to get past. I'm feeling stuck between wanting to protect my family and feeling pressure to keep the peace with my brother, even though I'm still hurt and furious about what he did. So, AITA for refusing to forgive him. Update 1. 2 months later. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for all the support and understanding you've shown since my last post. I've read every comment, and it's been incredibly validating to know that so many people understood why I was hurt. I really didn't expect this situation to go as far as it has, but here we are. A lot has happened in the last 2 months, so here's an update for those of you who wanted to know what's been going on. First, let me clarify a few things. I noticed some comments suggesting that I may have been unclear with my family about why I wanted my daughter's adoption kept private. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, my husband and I weren't trying to keep her adoption a secret out of shame or anything like that. We simply wanted her to grow up without feeling different or labeled as adopted. It was important for us that she would find out on her own terms, when she's old enough to understand it. We'd shared this with a few close family members, including Ryan, and made it clear that this was our choice and our story to tell when the time felt right. After the incident at that family gathering, I decided to take some space from Ryan. I needed time to cool down and figure out what I wanted to do. Ryan tried reaching out several times, sending texts and leaving voicemails saying he was sorry and that he didn't mean any harm. But none of his messages really sounded like he understood why I was hurt. Instead, it felt like he was more focused on easing his own guilt. He'd say things like, "You know I'd never do anything to hurt you," and "This is tearing me up, too." I started to feel like he was asking me to comfort him instead of taking responsibility for what he did. A couple of weeks after the incident, my mom reached out, asking if I could meet her for coffee. I could tell from her voice that she wanted to make peace, and she started suggesting that I meet up with Ryan to talk things through. She kept saying things like, "He's your brother, he didn't mean to hurt you," and "Family is more important than any one argument." While I understand that family is essential to her, it felt like she was minimizing my feelings to avoid the tension. I explained that Ryan had broken a very personal boundary, and I needed him to understand why it hurt me so much before I could even think about forgiving him. My mom seemed to understand, but she still encouraged me to give him another chance. Finally, about a month later, I received a different kind of message from Ryan. This time, he actually seemed to take responsibility, saying he was sorry for betraying my trust and overstepping in a way he had no right to. He said he realized he had hurt me deeply and admitted that he'd acted selfishly, putting his own curiosity and assumptions ahead of my boundaries. He even said that he'd understand if it took a long time for me to fully trust him again. After some thought, I agreed to meet him for coffee, but I told him that I needed him to listen more than talk. When we sat down, Ryan seemed genuinely remorseful. He admitted that he hadn't thought about how much this meant to me, and he said that he now understood how wrong it was to take the decision of when and how to share this out of my hands. For the first time, it felt like he wasn't just apologizing for show. He actually understood the gravity of what he'd done. I told him that I wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but was open to slowly rebuilding our relationship. Edit. After we met, I felt a little more hopeful. But things got complicated again when my mom found out we'd talked. She assumed this meant everything was back to normal and started pushing me to fully reconcile with him, saying, "He's already apologized, so it's time to move on." I told her that trust isn't something you can just snap back into place and that I wanted to take things slow. But she was frustrated, saying I was being too rigid about the situation. I had to remind her that while forgiveness is something I want to offer eventually, Ryan had hurt me deeply, and moving past that would take time. Since then, my relationship with Ryan has been cautiously civil. We're trying to find a new rhythm, but I'm still hesitant to fully let him back into my life. My mom's pressure has been a constant source of stress, and it's clear that she wants me to just let it go. I've had to remind her repeatedly that it's my choice to decide when and if I'm ready to trust him again. So that's where things stand for now. I'm slowly opening up to my brother, but still keeping some distance. I'm focusing on protecting my family's boundaries and prioritizing my daughter's well-being over any pressure to forgive for the sake of family harmony. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Thank you all for giving me the space to work through this. Update 2. 3 months after last update. Hi everyone, I really didn't expect to be back with another update, but a lot has happened since my last post, and I could use some advice on where to go from here. Thank you all for the overwhelming support and understanding so far. It has honestly been a lifeline. I know a lot of you have been following this journey with me, and your comments have helped me stay grounded and stick to my boundaries. After my last update, things with Ryan were going, okay, I guess. We'd started talking more, but I was careful to keep things light and avoid any in-depth discussions about what happened. I thought maybe we could slowly work our way back to some kind of normal relationship, but I also kept a bit of distance. I didn't want to jump back into full trust mode right away, and I thought Ryan understood that. He was being respectful, or so I thought, and he didn't bring up the adoption issue again. But here's where things took a turn. Last month, my husband and I hosted a small gathering at our home for my birthday. We kept it intimate, inviting only close friends and family, including Ryan. Everything seemed fine at first. We were laughing, sharing stories, and for the first time in a while, I felt like things were genuinely relaxed between me and my family. Even Ryan was acting completely normal, and I was beginning to feel like maybe we were finally on the path to mending our relationship. At one point during the night, I walked into the kitchen to grab some more drinks and overheard Ryan talking to a couple of our cousins. He was saying something along the lines of, well, she's still being sensitive about it, but I guess that's to be expected with the whole adoption thing. I froze, feeling that familiar anger and hurt bubbling up all over again. I stayed out of sight, trying to hear what else he was saying. And that's when I heard him basically giving our cousins the full rundown of the adoption story. Details I'd never shared with them and had only told Ryan in confidence. He was talking about our struggles, our reasons for adopting, even some of the heartbreaking losses we went through before we decided to adopt. I felt absolutely gutted. It was like deja vu, only worse because I'd let myself believe that Ryan was genuinely trying to rebuild our trust. I could barely keep it together, but I knew I couldn't let this slide. I waited until the party wound down, then pulled him aside and asked him, point blank, why he thought it was okay to share that information. He looked genuinely confused and said something like, I didn't think it was a big deal. Their family, they were bound to find out eventually. That response sent me over the edge. I told him that he had no right to share something so personal, especially after everything that had happened. He had promised to keep it private, and yet here he was, disregarding our boundaries all over again. He just shrugged and said, "You're making too big a deal out of this. They're going to be part of her life. It's not like it's some huge secret." At that point, I completely lost it. I told him that he clearly didn't understand or respect my boundaries, and that, honestly, I didn't think I could have any kind of meaningful relationship with him if he couldn't keep his word. I reminded him that our daughter's adoption story was for my husband and me to share, no one else. He tried to argue, saying that he was just being open with the family and that I was overreacting. That was it for me. I told him to leave and made it clear that I needed a break from him indefinitely. In the weeks following that night, Ryan has been texting, trying to make things right, but I've barely responded. He sent one message trying to apologize, but it quickly turned into him defending his actions, saying I'm being unfair for shutting him out of our lives. My mum, of course, heard about the situation and has been telling me to find forgiveness in my heart and let bygones be bygones. According to her, I'm being stubborn and tearing the family apart over what she calls a misunderstanding. She's even said that if I don't forgive Ryan, it could lead to a permanent rift in our family. But at this point, I feel like I'm at the end of my rope. I'm exhausted. I feel like my trust has been broken all over again, and I can't see how I can move forward with Ryan if he keeps crossing boundaries. My husband has been incredibly supportive through all of this, but even he's starting to feel the strain. He agrees that Ryan's behavior was completely out of line, but he's also concerned about how my family is pushing me to forgive so quickly. He knows how important family is to me, but he also knows that trust is essential, and Ryan has betrayed it twice now. Edit. For those asking, I did have a serious conversation with my mom about the importance of privacy and boundaries, and I tried explaining again that this isn't just about forgiving and forgetting. It's about respecting the fact that some parts of our lives are meant to be private. My mom still doesn't fully understand. She keeps saying, Ryan didn't mean any harm, and seems more worried about keeping the peace than about acknowledging my very real hurt and frustration. It's incredibly disappointing, and it makes me feel even more isolated in this. At this point, I've decided to go no contact with Ryan for now. I've told my family that I need time and space to process everything, and I've asked them to respect that decision. I also clarified that this isn't about holding a grudge. It's about protecting my peace and my daughter's privacy. If Ryan ever truly understands the weight of his actions, maybe we'll be able to have a relationship again. But for now, I need distance. Thank you all for sticking with me through this mess. I genuinely don't know where things will go from here, but I'll continue to put my family's well-being first.